Hello world, if you don't know what RNGing is, then you've come to the right place. RNG stands for Random Number Generator, and it's the process of obtaining Pokémon that are flawless, shiny, or even both, without cheating. It relies on understanding how the game generates Pokémon, and playing this to the RNG's advantage. Due to the hundreds of thousands of calculations that an RNG would have to perform in order to RNG a good Pokémon, a program called the RNG Reporter is used to do some of these calculations for you. But before we can even think about Pokémon, we must understand what a random number generator is and how it works, because most RNGs aren't actually random. They base their numbers on algorithms, so therefore they can be predicted, because if you know what the algorithm is and what goes into it, you can work out what comes out the other side. Hence why they are often called pseudo-random number generators. If you want a number generator that neither humans nor machines can predict, you need a big, expensive contraption that bases its numbers on the decay of radioactive material inside it. And obviously, it wouldn't be a good idea to have radioactive material inside a video game. In fact, due to how expensive these are, they are only used for important things like the winners of premium bonds. Everything else uses algorithms. Now back to Pokémon. The games use these numbers produced by the RNG to determine everything that happens in the game. For example, the numbers make up a Pokémon's personality ID, and that ID controls almost everything about a Pokémon, including its ability, nature, gender, and shininess. Different algorithms are used in Pokémon depending on what game it is and what the number is being used for. Simply put, from a single number, known as a seed, an algorithm will produce an infinite string of numbers one at a time. How the seed itself is generated, however, varies from generation to generation. By the way, if these numbers look odd to you, click the link on the screen. Every time you start up your game, the seed changes and new numbers are produced. In Emerald it always starts at 0. For the rest of Gen 3, it's based on how quickly you go through the title sequence. This is called a delay. When the internal battery runs dry, or is removed, from Ruby and Sapphire, the seed will always be 5A0. For all Gen 4 games, it's based on a combination of the date and time as well as the delay. For Black and White 1 and 2, it's based on a combination of the date and time and what buttons are pressed during the game's startup. There is another method using the C gear in Black and White 1, but nobody uses it, and it was actually removed from Black and White 2. Each of the numbers produced by the RNG is known as a frame. As you play through the game, the frames will be advancing. Whenever anything happens in the game that requires a random number, at that instant the game looks at the current frame and uses that number. In Gen 3 the frames would flash by 60 times a second, but in the newer games the next frame is only produced when the previous one has been used. The RNG Reporter searches through millions of seeds, looking for frames that yield the Pokémon you want. It will tell you what you need to change the date and time to in order to hit the right seed, and it will tell you what frame the Pokémon is on, so that you can skip the useless ones and encounter the Pokémon on the right frame. So, what do you actually do to RNG? For Gen 3, where the frames advance 60 times a second, you have to be able to encounter a Pokémon at the exact time, which isn't as hard as it sounds, especially as all the legendaries are stationary, and you can use timers on your computer that beep when you're supposed to press buttons. However, due to the limited number of starting seeds, you can't get flawless Pokémon without waiting weeks for the right frame. For Gen 4 games, you can manually change the date and time to get any of millions of seeds, meaning you can find flawless Pokémon within the first few frames. You have to get the same delay each time, but if you always go as fast as you can hit the same delay quite frequently. The frames only advance when something happens in the game, so you can use coin flips or the Pokégear to skip frames until you get to the one you want. In Gen 5, non-C gear RNGing is very quick. You just set the date and time to what the RNG Reporter says and boot up your game. You don't have to hit any delays, and you skip frames by saving or listening to chat noises. So that was a rather quick overview. Here's the table of contents to go back and listen to things. Helpful links are in the description, and good luck with your RNGing.